The mask of hyper-masculinity is hiding a fractured identity. We've been conditioned to believe that the loudest man in the room is the strongest, that the one who flexes his ego the hardest has the most confidence. But here's the truth no one wants to talk about. The man who constantly broadcasts his masculinity is usually the one most disconnected from it. The louder the performance, the deeper the pain, the more intense the persona, the more broken the identity underneath. Narcissistic men don't show up to connect, they show up to defend. Every word, every action, every power move is an act of self-preservation. They don't come into a room as they are, they come armored. And that armor looks like arrogance, domination, bravado. But what it's really hiding is something fragile, something vulnerable, something they're terrified to let anyone see. The truth about who they really are. What's that truth? That they've never taken the time to meet their authentic selves. Somewhere in their journey, maybe as boys, maybe through trauma, maybe from cultural pressure, they decided that being emotional was weak. That being soft meant being broken. That being introspective was dangerous. So they shut the door on vulnerability and locked themselves out of their own hearts. And once that door slammed shut, they went hunting for a replacement. Since they couldn't be vulnerable, they chose dominance. Since they couldn't feel deeply, they chose control. Since they couldn't show who they were, they created a version of themselves that looked untouchable, unstoppable, and emotionally bulletproof. But that version, it's not real. It's a projection, and it's exhausting to maintain. This is why narcissistic men are always performing. They never rest. They're constantly working to make sure the mask doesn't crack. Every compliment fuels their illusion. Every challenge threatens it. That's why they explode when you question them. That's why they gaslight you when you confront them. They're not reacting to you. They're defending the mask from destruction. Because if the mask shatters, they fear their entire identity will crumble with it. The mask is heavy and it's lonely. When your whole life is a performance, you don't have real relationships. You have fans, followers, and admirers. But never real friends, never real intimacy, never real love. Why? Because love requires truth. Love demands vulnerability, and the narcissist has built his empire on the exact opposite of that. Inside that shell is not a confident man, it's a frightened boy. A boy who never felt seen. A boy who never felt safe enough to express his truth. A boy who learned early on that emotions meant danger, that honesty meant rejection, and that to survive, he'd have to fake it until he made it. But the tragedy is, he never makes it. He just keeps faking and faking and faking, until the lie becomes so thick, even he can't find the real him anymore. This is why he can't handle criticism. This is why he reacts with rage instead of reflection. Because even the smallest challenge to his persona feels like a threat to his existence. It's not about pride, it's about panic. He's not protecting his ego, he's protecting himself from collapse. And that's why the more fragile his identity, the more aggressive his behavior becomes. You've probably felt it. The moment you see through the mask and he senses it, that's when the manipulation ramps up. That's when the silent treatment starts. That's when the gaslighting kicks in. Because nothing terrifies a narcissistic man more than being seen. Truly seen, not the image he curates, but the reality he hides, so they stay busy. Busy dominating, busy seducing, busy achieving. They stack up accomplishments, bodies, admirers, not because they love life, but because they fear stillness. Stillness means silence, and silence means confrontation. With the truth, with the pain, with the emptiness. And that's the one conversation they refuse to have. What they don't understand is this. Masks are made to be worn temporarily, not lived in. You can't breathe in a mask forever. Eventually, it suffocates your spirit. But when you've built your whole identity around the illusion, you'd rather choke than reveal who you really are. That's how deep the fear runs. That's how tragic the lie becomes. The sad part, this isn't about evil, it's about disconnection. These men aren't villains, they're lost, but they've been lost for so long, they forgot they're even searching. And in that fog, they hurt others. They wound partners, they destroy families, they sabotage love. Not because they enjoy it, but because they don't know how to do it differently. It's not your job to fix them. It's your job to recognize what's real and what's performance, to protect yourself from the illusion, to stop chasing connection with someone who's not even connected to himself. Because until he takes off that mask, there is no one real to love. And make no mistake, no amount of love, loyalty, or logic will bring out the real him. That work is his. That journey must be chosen, not forced. Until then, you're dancing with a projection, loving a fantasy, and begging a mask to be a man. You owe it to yourself to love something real, to connect with someone whose strength isn't a performance, but a product of truth, vulnerability, and self-awareness. And until he chooses to become that man, the best thing you can do is walk away from the mask. Narcissists are addicted to external validation because they feel emotionally empty. There's a hunger inside the narcissistic man that never stops gnawing. It's invisible, but it's powerful. It's a bottomless pit in his soul, and the only thing he believes can fill it is the approval, admiration, and validation of other people. But here's the catch. No matter how much he gets, it's never enough. Because he's not filling a gap. He's feeding a black hole of self. Hate disguised as self-love. Validation to a narcissist isn't a nice-to-have, it's a life support system. Without the praise, the applause, the attention, he begins to suffocate emotionally. His confidence isn't built from within. It's borrowed. It's leased from other people's opinions, other people's compliments, other people's perception of him. He doesn't own his self-worth. He rents it. And the rent is due every single day. That's why he constantly needs an audience. Whether it's social media followers, romantic conquests, or professional admirers, he surrounds himself with people who can reflect back to him the image he wants to see. He doesn't build self-esteem by knowing who he is. He builds it by controlling what you see. And if you stop clapping, he starts crumbling. You've seen it. The moment you stop worshiping him, he starts resenting you. The moment you stop feeding his ego, he starts punishing you. He doesn't love you. He loves the way you make him feel about himself. And the second you stop making him feel like a god, you become disposable. He's not interested in connection. He's interested in consumption. But the more validation he chases, the emptier he becomes. Why? Because every compliment that comes from the outside confirms what he fears inside, that he has no real value without performance, that he must earn love through manipulation, that he is only as good as the reflection others provide him. And so he becomes addicted, not to you, not to success, not even to sex, but to the high of being admired. This is why narcissists burn out relationships like matches. At first, they shine bright. They'll love, bomb you, seduce you, shower you with attention. But the moment you expect emotional intimacy, real vulnerability, or mutual respect, they recoil. They weren't in it for the relationship. They were in it for the rush. And now that the high is gone, they're gone too. And when that validation dries up, they panic. That's when they start reaching out to exes. That's when they seek out side flings. That's when they post thirst traps and vague social media messages begging for attention. Not because they miss anyone, but because they can't survive without being seen. Their fear isn't of being alone, it's of being invisible. So they chase more followers, more attention, more praise. But here's what they don't understand. External validation is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become, and eventually it poisons you. The very thing you thought would sustain you ends up destroying you. And by the time the narcissist realizes this, he's often left alone, addicted, and hollow. But he won't admit that. No, he'll double down. He'll build a new image, a new audience, a new illusion. He'll pretend he's thriving while bleeding emotionally beneath the surface. He'll wear the smile of a champion and the soul of a ghost. Because nothing terrifies him more than confronting the truth, he has no idea who he is without an audience. This is the core tragedy of the narcissistic man. He's spent so long performing, he forgot how to be. He's so accustomed to being admired that he's allergic to being loved, because love sees through the image. Love touches the soul, love knows you, but how can you be loved if you never show who you really are? And if you ever try to hold up a mirror, if you ever try to show him his emotional emptiness, prepare for war. He'll call you crazy, he'll accuse you of being the narcissist, he'll attack your character, your intelligence, your sanity. Because in his world, anyone who threatens his illusion is an enemy, and the more right you are, the more vicious his retaliation becomes. But you have to understand this, it's not about you. It was never about you. You were just the supplier. You were the drug dealer he needed to stay high on himself. And the moment you stopped supplying, he went into withdrawal. That's not love, that's addiction. And the only cure for that kind of addiction is detox from validation dependency. You can't heal a man who doesn't want to feel. You can't pour love into a cup with no bottom. You can't validate someone into wholeness when they won't look inward. True healing starts with silence, stillness, ownership, and those are the very things the narcissist refuses to embrace. You owe it to yourself to stop playing the role of mirror. You are not a reflection board for someone else's broken identity. You are not here to rescue, repair, or revive a man who refuses to admit he's emotionally bankrupt. Let him chase his audience. Let him crave the applause. But you go where real love lives, where depth matters more than display, and truth beats performance every time. Many narcissistic men avoid intimacy because they're conflicted about their own identity. Let's rip the mask off. Narcissistic men don't run from love because they're powerful. They run because they're petrified. They don't avoid intimacy because they don't need it. They avoid it because it threatens the fragile house of mirrors they've built around their identity. Intimacy isn't just connection to them, it's exposure. It's emotional nakedness, and that's the one thing they cannot tolerate. You see, narcissists are masters of the external image, but amateurs of the internal truth. Their entire lives are built on performance. Charm, control, persona, but when someone gets too close, when a real connection starts forming, it shakes them. It pushes up the fear that someone might see past the act and into the chaos they've spent their whole life running from. This is why they push people away right when things get real. You'll think everything is going fine, the connection is deepening, the vulnerability is growing, then boom. They pull back, start a fight, or sabotage the bond. Why? Because intimacy threatens to uncover the one thing they can't face, their fractured identity. They don't know who they are when they're not being admired. They've worn so many masks, played so many roles, they've forgotten their original face. And when you offer true intimacy, when you offer to love the real them, they panic, because the real them is a stranger even to themselves. That's the dark irony. The narcissist desperately craves love, but he sabotages it every time it gets close. Not because he doesn't want it, but because deep down he doesn't believe he's worthy of it. His bravado is a bluff, his arrogance is armor, his control is compensation. He's terrified that if someone truly sees him, they'll leave. So he leaves first. But you can't build intimacy on fear. You can't grow love where there's emotional hiding. Narcissistic men live in a state of identity conflict. They're one person in public, another in private, and a stranger to themselves in solitude. They've built an identity on attention, not authenticity, and attention can't hold up under the weight of real relationship. They might present as hyper-masculine, but their inner world is chaotic, uncertain, and full of contradiction. They act dominant but feel powerless. They pretend they don't care, but they're obsessed with perception. They run from emotional depth, yet ache for someone to truly understand them. That's the psychological war they live in. They don't just avoid intimacy with you. They avoid it with themselves. They don't journal. They don't self-reflect. They don't sit still in silence. Why? Because when the noise stops, the truth starts speaking. And the truth is this: they're lost. They're scared. And they've been pretending for so long. They don't even know how to begin telling the truth. And so they wear different masks for different people. With one group, they're the hero. With another, the victim. With someone else, the genius, the lover, the savior. But in private, they're none of these. They're a chameleon who's forgotten its original color. And intimacy is the one mirror that could force them to look. But mirrors are dangerous to men who live behind masks, because intimacy doesn't admire, it reveals, it challenges, it sees beyond the performance. And that's why narcissists often accuse their most loving partners of being too much, too intense, or too emotional. It's not that your love is overwhelming. It's that it demands authenticity, and they can't deliver it. So what do? They flee to shallow relationships. They chase fantasy over depth. They seek out people who only know the surface and praise the image, because shallow is safe. Surface is easy, but deep. Deep exposes the disconnection they carry within, and they'll sacrifice real connection every time to avoid that confrontation. It's a tragedy, because the very thing that could heal them, intimacy, is what they run from the most. But you can't save someone who refuses to face themselves. You can't force identity on a man who is addicted to illusion. The moment you try to deepen the bond, he'll pull away, distract, blame, or disappear. But don't let that confuse you. His retreat is not proof of your failure. It's proof of his unresolved identity war. You were the mirror, and he wasn't ready to see. You were the invitation, and he rejected it. Not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it was too real. And real is radioactive to someone living in a fantasy. That's why many narcissistic men avoid emotional intimacy like it's a threat. Because to them it is. It threatens the narrative, it threatens the delusion, it threatens the false self. But you're not a threat, you're a gift, and if he can't receive it, that's not your burden to carry. That's the price of refusing to know yourself. The hidden homoerotic fixation some narcissistic men develop through competition with other men lets go deeper into the shadows, where truth hides behind pride and obsession. Narcissistic men are often locked in intense, compulsive rivalries with other men. But this isn't just competition. It's not simple ego or ambition. It's something deeper, stranger, more conflicted. At its core, there's a hidden fixation, one that blends admiration, envy, and suppressed desire in a psychological cocktail that few are willing to name. Watch closely and you'll see the obsession play out. They mirror other men, they study them, they want to beat them, outshine them, dominate them, but also in some strange way be them. They become obsessed with the men who possess qualities they secretly feel they lack. Charisma, strength, confidence, power. This obsession isn't just competitive, it's intimate, emotional, almost erotic in its intensity. Think about it. They remember everything about the men they compete with. The way they dress, the way they speak, their routines, their style, their presence. They might mock or belittle them on the surface, but under the sarcasm is fixation. They idolize and despise them in equal measure. It's a form of psychological projection, and it's potent. This obsession becomes a strange emotional triangle. The narcissist needs the admiration of others, but also craves the dominance and validation of the men he's secretly idolizing. He tries to steal their energy, their essence, their social currency. It's not always conscious. Often he doesn't even realize how entangled he's become in the other man's aura, but it drives him, it consumes him. These fixations grow from his deep confusion about identity. Narcissistic men aren't grounded in who they are. They borrow identity from outside, and when they find a man who reflects something they believe they're missing, they don't just admire it. They attach to it. Almost like a parasite clinging to its host, they seek validation through domination. But here's the psychological twist: underneath all the rivalry and bravado, there's often a suppressed desire. Not necessarily sexual in action, but emotional in depth, a longing for closeness, for acknowledgement, for connection. Because the truth is, many narcissistic men feel more emotionally drawn to men than they do to women. Not because of orientation, but because women expose them, while men represent something they want to absorb. This is where the homoerotic tension begins. It's not about physical attraction alone. It's about psychological merging. They want to feel powerful like him, be respected like him, move through life like him, and in the process of competing, they create emotional bonds that they won't admit even exist. They'll talk about them nonstop, react to their successes, try to one-up their every move, but deep down they're fixated, and it's toxic for both the narcissist and the people around them, because instead of developing authentic friendships, they turn other men into mirrors or enemies. Instead of owning their emotional needs, they hide them behind aggression, dominance, or mockery. They fear vulnerability but crave connection. They fear weakness but admire strength. And they're caught in a cycle of admiration they can never truly satisfy. This fixation often leads them to sabotage real intimacy with women. They can't connect deeply because their emotional bandwidth is wrapped up in proving themselves to other men. They can't bond because they're too busy posturing. They can't love because they're obsessed with being superior, and that obsession drains everything else. When you're in a relationship with a narcissistic man like this, you'll often feel like he's emotionally unavailable, but energized when he's around other men. You'll feel like he's dismissive of your opinions, but captivated by the feedback of his male peers. You'll notice him light up when competing with a man, but go cold when you try to connect. It's confusing, until you realize what's happening beneath the surface. What's happening is emotional displacement. He's shifting the focus of connection, excitement, and admiration away from romantic partnership and into performance-based rivalry. He may not even be aware of it, but he is channeling emotional intimacy into competition. And that creates a toxic storm of jealousy, obsession, and disconnection. The truth is, he's not just trying to win against other men. He's trying to be them, while denying that desire even exists. He's repressing emotional longings that have no outlet because vulnerability feels like death to him. So the energy finds another way out through fixations, through toxic rivalries, through admiration masked as animosity. And the longer this goes on, the deeper the psychological confusion grows. He might even start to devalue you women altogether, because he resents the way they expose his emotional fragility. In his world, other men represent power and identity, while women become threats to the illusion. That's why some narcissistic men seem emotionally closer to their bros than to the women who love them. It's not just culture, it's conflict, internal, unresolved, but this pattern doesn't lead to wholeness. It leads to isolation. No matter how many competitions he wins, he never feels seen. No matter how many men he defeats, he never feels complete. Because the truth is, he's not fighting them. He's fighting himself. And until he faces that fractured identity, he'll keep running in circles, confusing obsession with connection and rivalry with love. Why narcissistic men feel safer being emotionally open with men than with women, there's a hidden paradox in the narcissistic man's emotional world. He will expose his thoughts, share his battles, and even become vulnerable, but not with the woman in his life. He'll do it with his male friends, with coworkers, with even a distant mentor before he ever does it with the person who loves him. And it leaves women feeling confused, neglected, and emotionally abandoned. But the truth behind it is psychological, not just personal. Narcissistic men operate from a place of control. They must control how they are seen, how they are heard, how they are interpreted. Vulnerability is not just scary to them. It's threatening. Because to be vulnerable is to relinquish power, and they see power as survival, and in the realm of intimacy with women, true intimacy, they feel dangerously exposed. When a woman asks a narcissistic man to open up, to be honest, to be real, he interprets it not as an invitation, but as a trap. Why? because deep down he carries the belief that emotional exposure equals weakness, and weakness is unacceptable. But with men, other men who understand the game, who respect hierarchy, who won't challenge emotional control in the same way, he can let down his guard just a little. He doesn't risk as much emotionally when opening up to men. The stakes feel lower. With women, there's this internalized fear that if they see the chinks in his armor, they'll lose respect, or worse, they'll try to fix him. And nothing terrifies a narcissistic man more than someone trying to fix what he's hiding, because that means they see what he doesn't want to admit exists. He fears emotional intimacy with women because it's layered. It demands honesty, humility, and surrender. It forces him to acknowledge past wounds, to show parts of himself he's kept buried, to admit that he isn't invincible. But with men, especially those who also wear emotional masks, there's an unspoken agreement. We can share, but don't dig too deep. That surface-level sharing feels safer to him. He may open up about struggles, talk about business failures, even joke about insecurities, but it's all curated. It's vulnerability on his terms. He might express doubt, but not despair. He might admit stress, but not sadness. And even when he opens up more deeply, it's often about competition, legacy, or ambition, not emotions like shame, regret, or fear of abandonment. With women, those deeper emotions come to the surface, especially when she's emotionally intelligent, aware, and connected. She can sense the incongruence. She can feel that what he says and what he means don't match. She asks questions he doesn't want to answer. She sees through the mask, and that scares him, because her ability to see him is a threat to the illusion he works so hard to maintain. So instead, he'll retreat. He'll withhold. He'll shut down emotionally and redirect that energy toward his male connections. He'll talk for hours with a male friend about work, ideas, or even frustrations, but come home and offer his partner 5 minutes of silence or small talk. And it hurts. It makes the woman feel unworthy, invisible, like she's being kept outside a door that everyone else has access to. But this isn't because she's unworthy. It's because she's too powerful. Emotionally powerful, a mirror he can't hide from. She triggers the truth he runs from, that he is scared, that he is confused, that he does need to heal, and for a narcissistic man, admitting any of that feels like surrender. So he clings to safer connections, where no one will ask him to unravel. This creates a dynamic where women are punished for being emotionally attuned, while men are rewarded for staying emotionally shallow. The narcissist creates a hierarchy in his relationships, placing his male connections above his romantic partner in emotional value, not because he loves them more, but because they don't challenge him to grow. And growth, to him, feels like danger. What he fails to realize is that real love requires growth. Real intimacy requires risk, and the reason he keeps sabotaging emotional connections with women is because he's still imprisoned by the need to control perception. He can't receive love if he won't let it touch him. He can't be supported if he won't admit he's struggling. He can't be known if he won't let himself be seen. So he continues the cycle, keeping women at arm's length emotionally while building codependent connections with male peers that feel safe, but are ultimately superficial. He becomes emotionally bonded to men not through love, but through avoidance. Avoidance of real emotional intimacy, of honest connection, of feminine insight. And for the woman in his life, it becomes soul-crushing. She watches him laugh, cry, vent, and connect with others, while giving her the cold, filtered version of himself. She knows he's capable of emotional depth, but he won't bring it home. She's left wondering what more she needs to be, how else she should show up when the truth is, it's not her, it's him. He's afraid of her power to reveal what he's not ready to face. And until he does the work, until he confronts the fear that says, if I'm vulnerable with her, I'll be controlled, judged, or abandoned, he'll stay trapped in a world of emotional avoidance. He'll keep choosing shallow safety over deep love. And he'll never truly feel connected, not to women, not to men, not even to himself. The crisis of identity, and why many narcissistic men secretly feel like imposters in their own masculinity beneath the swagger, beneath the confidence, beneath the perfectly curated image. There's a secret most narcissistic men would rather die than admit. It's the identity crisis they battle in silence, a gnawing, ever-present sense that they are not who they pretend to be, that their masculinity is borrowed, performed, and hollow. They feel like actors in a role they didn't write but must play perfectly, or risk losing everything. From an early age, these men are taught one thing: masculinity means power, dominance, and stoicism. Show emotion and you're weak. Lose control and you're inferior. Be vulnerable and you're broken. So what do? They armor up, they put on the performance, they become the provider, the protector, the leader, but not because it's who they are, because it's who they think they have to be. This performance becomes their identity. Every word is calculated, every gesture is rehearsed, every emotion is suppressed. They smile when they're supposed to smile. They rage when they're supposed to be angry, but it's all a mask. A desperate attempt to avoid the truth that haunts them. I don't really know who I am without the performance. This inner disconnect creates a fracture in the soul. On the outside, they're the confident alpha. But on the inside, they're the scared boy who never got the chance to be fully human, who was punished for crying, mocked for feeling, shamed for softness. That boy never got to grow into a man. He just learned how to survive by pretending. And here's the dangerous part. When a man spends his life pretending, he starts to believe the lie is truth. But something always slips. A relationship fails. A breakdown happens. He snaps at the wrong person. He wakes up one day and looks in the mirror and realizes he doesn't recognize the man staring back. And that moment terrifies him more than any outside threat ever could. At the heart of narcissistic behavior is this constant need to protect a fragile sense of self. That's why criticism feels like betrayal. That's why emotional connection feels like a trap. Because anything that touches the real self, the part that's insecure, unsure, or scared, feels like a threat to the whole identity. The ego steps in like a bodyguard, attacking anything that dares to pierce the illusion. This is where the crisis deepens, because deep down, the narcissistic man knows something is off. He may not have the language for it, but he feels it. The emptiness, the loneliness, the fact that his relationships don't feel real, that love feels like a transaction, that his life is full of noise but lacks meaning. And instead of facing it, he blames. He points the finger outward because turning it inward would destroy the fragile illusion of control. And here's the shocking truth. Many of these men feel alienated not just from others, but from their own masculinity. They don't trust it. They don't feel safe in it because it was never authentic. It was taught to them through trauma, pressure, and performance. They mimic masculinity like a language they were forced to memorize phonetically, but never fluently understood. So they overcompensate. They become hyper-masculine, aggressively dominant, emotionally detached. They ridicule softness in other men. They mock sensitivity in women. They chase money, sex, and status not because they enjoy it, but because they think it proves something. They become addicted to the illusion of manhood while starving for the experience of being whole. But masculinity isn't the problem. The false version of masculinity they were sold is. Real masculinity is strength and softness. It's power with compassion. It's leadership without control. It's being rooted enough in who you are that you don't have to prove it to anyone. But for the narcissistic man, this definition feels unreachable, so he mocks it, dismisses it, attacks it because he fears it. He fears it because true masculinity would require him to stop performing, to lay down the armor to feel again, and if he does that, he's terrified he'll fall apart. But what he doesn't realize is, he's already falling apart, quietly, slowly, emotionally, spiritually. and the only thing holding the pieces together is a mask that's cracking more every day. That's why his relationships don't last. That's why his success never feels satisfying. That's why, in moments of silence, he feels like a ghost walking through his own life. He's haunted by a question he refuses to answer: who am I really? And until he answers it, until he's brave enough to tear off the mask and face the scared boy underneath, he will remain an imposter in his own story. The tragedy is not that these men are broken. The tragedy is that they were never allowed to be whole. They were never shown that being a man isn't about domination. It's about truth. It's about courage, not the courage to conquer others, but the courage to confront yourself, to own your story, to heal the wounds. To stop running from who you were and start becoming who you were meant to be, and this is the turning point. The moment where the narcissistic man has a choice. Keep performing, keep running, keep pretending, or stop, strip it all back, and rebuild from the ground up. That kind of transformation is brutal, but it's also the only path to freedom. Because a man who knows who he is, deeply, fully, unapologetically, is a man who doesn't need to hurt others to feel powerful. He already is. The mask is slipping, and it's time to face the truth. Let's not dance around the fire anymore. Let's walk straight into it. Because truth doesn't burn you, it burns what isn't you. And here's the truth that echoes through every corner of this message. Narcissistic men are living double lives, one that is public, polished, and poisonous, and one that is private, pathetic, and painful. They've built their kingdoms on cracked foundations, but now the cracks are showing. The lie is this: that masculinity means domination, control, performance. That to be a man is to suppress feeling, to reject truth, to fake strength. But that lie has a price, and the bill always comes due. The narcissistic man pays for it in relationships that implode, families that fracture, reputations that rot from the inside. He pays for it in quiet moments when the applause stops, the mirror stares back, and there's no one left to impress. Just the hollow echo of a self he never got to become. He doesn't just hurt others. He is at war with himself. That's why he lashes out. That's why he seduces and discards. That's why he plays games with hearts and minds. Because controlling others is the only way he feels a flicker of control over his own fragmented identity. But deep down he knows it's not real, none of it is real. The sex, the status, the spotlight. It's all scaffolding around a soul that's afraid to be seen, and here's the brutal, liberating truth. The reason narcissistic men behave the way they do, the real reason behind the gaslighting, the cheating, the rage, the manipulation, is because they are trapped in a false version of themselves. A version that doesn't allow vulnerability, doesn't allow softness, doesn't allow humanity. That kind of repression isn't strength, it's fear. And fear disguised as power is still weakness. Some of them, yes, may even feel a sense of same-sex attraction buried under the years of repression, denial, and hyper-masculine performance. But it's not about orientation, it's about distortion, the distortion of identity. The confusion between dominance and desire, between intimacy and insecurity. They aren't living out love. They're chasing validation over and over, and it never lasts. It never satisfies, because it was never about others. It was always about escaping themselves. But here's what they didn't see coming. People are waking up. Women are waking up. The world is waking up. The game is over. The charm has expired. The manipulation is predictable. The mask is cracked. And the man behind it is no longer untouchable. He's exposed, and exposure always demands a choice: evolve or stay enslaved, transform or decay, tell the truth or be destroyed by the lie. To those who have been hurt by narcissistic men, this is your confirmation: it wasn't you. It was never your lack of worth, your lack of love, or your lack of loyalty. You were just the mirror that reflected what he refused to confront. You were the test of intimacy he couldn't pass because he hadn't passed it with himself. Let that truth heal you. Let it set you free. Let it give you your power back. And to the men still hiding behind the persona, Understand this. The world doesn't need more fake men. It needs real ones. Men who feel, men who lead from the heart, not from hurt, men who don't just perform masculinity, but embody maturity, men who can cry and still command respect, who can love without control, who can be fierce without being abusive. That's power, that's purpose, that's peace. So the time has come for accountability, for exposure, for healing, for rebirth. Not just for those who have suffered under the hand of narcissism, but for the very men who have lost themselves in it. You can't heal what you won't face, but once you face it, you can finally be free, not just from the mask, but from the pain that built it. The war is over when the pretending stops. The healing begins when the truth is spoken. And the future changes when we finally stop worshiping the image and start honoring the soul. No more hiding, no more hurting, no more lies. The mask is off, and now the real work begins.